Well, good afternoon. We're about ready to get started, and the panelists can work their way up here at their leisure. I'm Dennis Wiesenberg. I'm the provost at USM, and I'm happy to have you all here today to talk about tenure and promotion as part of this faculty first-year experience workshop. And looking out among the people here, I see there are a lot of faculty that are not in their first year, and they're department chairs and others, and so I'm not sure if they're here to learn or to give rebuttal to some of the things we're saying. I guess we'll find out as the discussion goes on. I'm going to start out with a few brief remarks, and the remarks that I'm making are in a PowerPoint that'll be put on the Provost website, so you don't need to try to write down what I'm saying, but I'd like you to think about some of the points, and many of those are ones that that should be obvious to you, but I think it's good to reiterate some of them, and then some might not be so obvious to you, but are based on experiences that we've had at least the last 3 or 4 years on how to make the process work better. And after I finish my remarks, we're going to have a panel, and I'll let the panelists introduce themselves in just a minute. And then those of you who are sitting in the back, there's no safe place in this room, because I'm sure that Dr. O'Brien, who will be moderating the session, will be wandering through the room with the microphone. So if you chose to sit in the back, that's not going to save you from participation in this event today. So I'd like to remind all faculty when they come in and as we go forward that the faculty handbook is really the guide that you need to be familiar with. In Chapter 9 of the faculty handbook describes the standards for tenure and for promotion and the process. And please remember, the faculty handbook is written by a committee and edited by a committee that's predominantly faculty members. Any changes do get approved by the president, but this is really you and your colleagues deciding on how we're going to tenure people, promote, and the process that we follow. The awarding of tenure is not guaranteed. The awarding of tenure is a privilege, and it's only awarded after a thorough review process which acknowledges the faculty member's professional experience and the likelihood that excellence will be continued substantially over a considerable period of time, and that effort on the faculty member at a very high level will contribute to the mission and needs of the university. So it's not just producing in the first 5 years and then showing what you've accomplished, but it's showing or providing evidence that we can expect and your colleagues can expect that continued excellence through the 35 or so years that you might be a faculty member here. So every university around the nation that has tenure has its own process, and it's distinct in many ways, but also has a lot of commonalities. And there are always professional and disciplinary standards, and typically those are written at the unit or departmental level, and the university and college also has their own standards. And the regulations and practices in most places are such that there's a governing board that actually makes the award of tenure, and everything that happens at the university level is a recommendation. And the process begins when you prepare a dossier for review that includes the material that shows the excellence in teaching, research, and service that's expected of faculty. That gets reviewed by a departmental committee of your colleagues in your discipline, by the department chair, by a college advisory committee made up of elected faculty from every department in your college, then by the dean, then by a university advisory committee that's made up of a couple of representatives for each of the colleges, plus the Gulf Coast and the libraries. And finally, it comes to the provost who makes a recommendation to the president. And 99% of the time, the president accepts the recommendation that comes out of our office, because we're as the office of the provost is tasked with making sure that academic affairs runs at the highest possible level. And then the president submits his recommendation to the Board of Trustees of the Institutions of Higher Learning in Mississippi, known as the IHL, and that board meets every month, and then in May or June they consider the tenure and promotion recommendations. Now, those of you who are at the level where you're an associate professor with tenure going to a full professor, those recommendations do not need to be submitted to the board. It's only when a promotion is accompanied with tenure that the board makes the approval. And so, as I've said, within each department there are a set of expectations, and within the college there are expectations, but the university as a whole has its own expectations as well. And as I said, a faculty member requesting tenure must provide substantive evidence. I'm going to emphasize the word substantive evidence of excellence in teaching, research, or creative activities and service. And to become a better university, my view is that when a faculty member comes up for tenure, we should look at the criteria. We should also look at the standing of that faculty member within the department. And hopefully the decision for tenure will be to tenure those faculty who are in the upper half of the productivity range of faculty in a particular department. And the reason that I say that, and some universities have that as a requirement, that you can only tenure faculty who are viewed as being in the upper half of the department, because if our goal is to improve the university and improve the faculty, if we tenure people in the upper half of a department as terms of their productivity, then the bar will move up. If we tenure people who are in the lower half or not as productive as we'd like them to be, then the average moves down, and that's not where I believe we want to go. We do not have that as a requirement at USM, but I always ask the chairs and the faculty to think about that if we're going to make this a better university. The key is that you're reviewed on the dossier that you submit. If you don't include material in the dossier, then it's not reviewed to determine the qualities that you have for tenure. The curriculum vitae, the CV, should reflect accurately your scholarship and research. And one of the things we ask, and please remember this for those of you who are preparing your dossiers for next year, is we ask if you have publications or creative activities, and those are multiple author presentations or other activities, that you include the percentage effort that you supplied for that. For example, if I'm publishing a paper with Dr. Heinhorst, and it's Heinhorst and Wiesenberg, what you need to let everyone know is what percentage of the effort you made and what percentage of the effort your colleagues made. And let me just say, based on past experience, we hope that will add up to 100%. And there has been one instance where someone was the sole author on a paper, and they said their contribution was 60%. And you can take that for what it's worth, but typically the multiple authors, it should equal to 100. I don't think they were from the math department. And the other piece of information on publications and creative activity that we ask you to be sure to include is the acceptance rate of the journal to which you're submitting. And if we'd like to know whether they accept 90% or 20%, and that gives the committee members at higher levels, the college or university, more information about the quality of your work. Whereas your departmental colleagues might know, that the Journal of Psychology is a better journal than the International Journal of Psychology. They'll know that within the psychology department, but they won't know that at the University Advisory Committee when you have people from other disciplines trying to assess the quality of the work in your dossier. One of the concerns that has risen in the last few years is there's a large number, thousands of what we call predatory journals. In these journals, it's really easy to get published. You send a paper and you send a check for $1,500 and it'll be published within a week, and the editor will send you a note saying it's peer reviewed. And a lot of these start International Journal of, and you'll find someone in India who's the editor of 150 of these journals. And they might have associate editors that are in the United States, and the associate editors are like the marketers. And what they do is they get a kickback of the $1,500 that you send, and it's a very easy way to get publications. But we have made a determination that publishing in these predatory journals is considered a disqualification for tenure. So it's incumbent upon you to make sure the journals you're choosing for your work are legitimate journals. There's a list on the web called Beall's List, where they keep a list of the predatory journals, the ones that are basically publishing anything you send for a price. And I encourage you to look at that and to make sure that you're not accidentally choosing a journal that's one of these bogus journals. There's a lot of literature out on this. There have been New York Times articles. There's a story of the guy that wrote a bogus article and sent it to 300 journals, and 150 of them accepted it. And there's also a computer program in math that just creates a gibberish math paper, and someone sent that in to one of these journals and it was accepted, and it made no sense at all. They're just people taking your money, and typically your colleagues will know what the quality journals are, and you just need to, that's something that's really come up nationwide. Typically they're open access, they're on the web. There's very little cost to them putting your paper up, but it could cost you if you don't pay attention to those journals. So I mentioned the dossier is really what's critical because the review is based on what you provide. There are two parts. There's volume one, which is the CV, your statement, to help you convince your colleagues that you should be awarded tenure or promoted. And in the dossier, the volume one includes materials that you've either provided or which copies will be sent back to you. Volume two is the support material, copies of your manuscripts, your teaching evaluations, and others. And remember, the dossier must include the evidence of your success for your colleagues and the other committees to evaluate. Once the dossier is submitted, no new material can be added to the dossier other than items that are mentioned in your initial submission. So if in your CV you have a paper that's submitted or in press and it gets accepted, then you can add that in later. But you cannot add new material to your dossier once it's submitted. It's a linear process, and what you've provided, you can update if it's mentioned initially, but you can't add new material as it goes forward. So the mechanics of the process, those of you who are going up for tenure in the fall, I encourage you to start early. Not in writing publications, it's probably too late for that, but I encourage you to start developing your dossier and to perhaps have someone in your department review the dossier to make sure it's complete and convincing and presented in a way that will help everyone understand what you've done. The forms and instructions are found on the Provost website. The dossiers are due into the departments September 27th, and the Provost recommendations go to the President on March 24th. And each step of the way, when a committee has reviewed your dossier, or the dean or the chair has reviewed your dossier, you'll get notification along the way. How many of you are submitting your dossier for the September deadline? Would you raise your hand? Only a couple. Well, that means most of you are earlier in the process, and hopefully this information at this stage will really be beneficial for you. So your goal in this is to make it really easy for the committees and the dean and the chair and the provost to give you the decision that you want. And what I mean from that is, if you're in a department that requires a certain number of publications, let's say 6, you want to publish more than 6. If it's 6, there could be question. If it's 8 or 9, life is going to be a lot easier for those making the reviews and ultimately for you. So you want to do more than just meet the minimum requirements. You want to look at the requirements and make sure your career is progressing so that you're doing so well that there's no concerns on any of your colleagues or others. I encourage you to read the unit criteria early and often, and carefully as well, because there are nuances in a lot of these that have been worked out over the years. It's important for you to understand in putting your material forward. And remember, you need to provide clear, concise evidence of your success. And as I said, you want to do much more than the minimum requirements. And finally, the one thing you need to convince your colleagues of is that you're not just going to work hard for 5 years, get tenure, and then you're going to coast for the next 30 years. You need to provide evidence that your accomplishments are going to be sustainable. And so we must believe that they're going to be sustainable to make the decision to grant you tenure at the university. In the tenure and promotion process this year, probably 90% or more of the dossiers that came through had almost unanimous votes all the way through. The departmental committee, the chair, the college, the dean, the university committee. And that's where you want to be. And you might seek out those colleagues who've are getting tenure this year. It'll be announced after the board approval, and ask them what they did that made it go so smoothly, and then take some guidance from them. So that's my words of wisdom, I hope, and they'll be posted on the Provost website. And now I'll turn the program over to Tom O'Brien, who will start the show.
Yeah, I'm going to take this off. Thank you, Provost Wiesenberg. I'm Tom O'Brien, the Department of Educational Studies and Research, and I'm going to facilitate a discussion. And I'm hoping that it'll be quite interactive. I see a number of tenured folk out there. I see a number of untenured folk out there. So hopefully we'll be able to exchange some ideas as the next hour unfolds. Let's first, though, let the panelists introduce themselves. Apparently a very diverse panel here, starting with Sabine.
I'm Sabine Heinhorst. I'm the oldest living faculty member on campus, I think.
There's a few dead ones.
What was that? Okay, well, close. I've been here over 27 years. I'm a professor and the current chair of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry.
Melissa?
My name is Melissa Thompson. I am an associate professor. This is my 7th year at the university, and I'm in the School of Human Performance and Recreation.
I'm Mark Waymar. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Music. I'm a music education professor. This is my 4th year. I have not gone up for tenure yet, but have gone past the 3rd year review, and I'm the division chair for music education in my department.
Great. Well, thank you for serving. First question, is it important to have a research agenda as you proceed through your probationary period? And will a research agenda, I might want to add to that, or a creative program for those of you who are in the creative arts. Melissa, you want to take that one on?
Sure. I think the research agenda is critically important for a number of reasons. It focuses your line of research, which, as Dr. Wiesenberg mentioned, I think is important in the review of your dossier, that you are going to have some continued success in the line of research that you pursue. But I also think it's helpful in terms of time management, because you're not continually starting over from ground zero or from the beginning when you're working on a new project. Your projects are building on one another, and when I think about a lot of different things, recruitment of graduate students, working in research groups, all those things I think are tied into having a clear, concise research agenda that you're pursuing.
And how about from the creative side, Mark?
We're all creative, right? But in the arts, yeah, it's very different for us. Even within my department, I have a PhD. Most of my colleagues have a DMA, and so what they do as creative and scholarly activity looks different than what mine looks like. I'll repeat something that was said. The agenda sets you forward on a trajectory, hopefully, to become the world's leading expert in that area, which causes you to be the go-to person for that, and brings a lot of attention not only to you, your department, but the university as well. In the arts, and certainly in my department, how different we all are, that the expertise as far as receiving tenure and promotion, those professors look to those that most look like them. Their teaching loads, their what they were hired to do, or the people that they look to for those answers. While there are a lot of people on campuses and lots of places to go to get advice with tenure and promotion, I would suggest we seek out those that look most like us. A lot of my colleagues, their agenda is performance, performing nationally and internationally. Mine is more academic and in the publication side of things.
Great. And Sabine's in the hard sciences, and she runs a lab, raises money, gets soft money here. Do you want to talk a little bit about a research agenda from where you're sitting?
Yes. When we hire assistant professors, we would never hire anybody who doesn't have a very strong research agenda. So that is the first step. And if you don't have a research agenda and are aggressively pursuing a research program, there is no chance that you will be tenured. So yes, extremely important.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about mentoring and the importance of finding a mentor or being a mentor. For just a show of hands, how many people have heard the word mentor before? Okay, good. Well, and how many people have been a mentor? Okay, and how many people are or have been mentored? Okay, so this is, and how many people like all of that stuff? Okay, good. Well, let's preach to the choir. Sabina.
Yeah, several years ago, Dennis pretty much made it mandatory for new faculty to be assigned a real, more senior faculty mentor, and I think it's very beneficial because when you become an assistant professor, it's I've heard the expression "drinking from a fire hose." There are so many different responsibilities that you have all of a sudden, so that it's very difficult to figure out what to do first and what to give the highest priority. And so a more senior faculty member from experience can tell you where you should focus your efforts and how you should prioritize your efforts. And research is always one of the efforts that's most easily put on the back burner when you have immediate deadlines. Oh, I need to have this committee meeting and this committee report in tomorrow, and I have this stack of exams to grade. Research always falls behind, and that's a mentor can tell you that that is probably not the way you want to go.
And that goes to the issue of balance. So Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit about how a mentor can maybe give some feedback on balancing the responsibilities of a professor?
Sure. I mean, I think there are a lot of things that coming out of a PhD program or into an assistant professor role that maybe we don't have a lot of experience with, and those new experiences are very time consuming, so having the balance is important. I think having somebody who can, well, first I would say I found the most important thing about having a mentor is finding someone who has shared values about what it is you were trying to accomplish, because they were much more understanding about the choices you were making. So I guess not everybody really would take that approach. But then being able to bounce ideas off of that person, is this an activity that I should engage in, or should I focus more on really putting in the time to this research project, or should I be serving on this committee? And those individuals are going to know more about the time involved in each of those activities than we're aware of as young faculty.
Yeah, and I think there are professional responsibilities that come with the professoriate, and then there are institutional responsibilities. And in the best cases, they line up, but they don't always line up. And that's where a mentor can really help you navigate the system. Mark, this is a quote from a question that came in a couple of years ago. I heard that in the final analysis, if your colleagues like you, you get tenure. And if your colleagues don't like you, you don't get tenure. Is that true?
Yes. That's it.
Okay, let's keep going.
We've all heard that at some point, and the researcher side of me says, well, let's define like. Do you like what I'm doing for our students? Do you like what I'm doing for the committees that I serve on? Do you like what I'm doing for the forward motion of my department? So if we're going to define like in that way, then yeah. Let's replace the word like with respect. And I'll also say, my mentor, who happens to be here, Nick Serrato, thank you for being my mentor. I think from day one, Nick established for me that he saw me as a piece of a puzzle that was all working together. And I think Nick has tried really hard to understand how we are different, although we're all part of that same team. And so that's been invaluable for me. Nick's scholarly agenda is very different than my research agenda, but Nick has asked me tons of questions about what's important to me and what does my tenure process look like, and I appreciate that. I'll also say Dean Mosier and both of the department chairs I have given me good information.
How many faculty have seen the mentor-mentee guidelines that are posted on the Provost's website? Two panelists. So I guess that's a good place to look for more information on that. Nick, I'm going to hand it over to Nick and let him talk about mentoring from the other side. Go ahead.
Well, I'm Nick Serraldo. I'm in the School of Music, and I'm here. I have tenure, but I thought that it was important as an evaluator to be here just as much as it is for the evaluated. Mentoring, for me, is a huge responsibility. It's a way to establish a relationship with someone who might be fearful of the process, very new at the process. And since I went through that process here, I can show them the ropes, I can help them find shortcuts, and I've found that it's been a pleasure to sort of help them collaborate with others in the department. Since I know many people in the department better than they do, I can help sort of translate certain experiences that they may have had. I can guide their creative activity, primarily because that's my field. It's also been an opportunity for me to reach out to other mentors who have been mentoring for longer than I have, and also in other departments, so that I can get more of a balanced view of things. Unfortunately, I've not had a chance to see the provost's information on this, and so now that I announced that, I'll look forward to doing so soon.
Thank you, Nick. Tish, how about you from a librarian's perspective? Talk about mentoring.
Well, I suppose one of the challenges that we have in the libraries is that what we do is different than what a lot of the other faculty on campus do. And in that sense, maybe we share a little bit with the creative arts in that, you know, our scholarship doesn't quite look like everybody else's scholarship. And so, in particular, I think a mentor in the libraries, you know, in addition to a lot of the things that any mentor would do, we also have to spend some efforts on kind of translating university policies and procedures and so forth, and kind of trying to help explain how those apply to our situation, which sometimes is a little bit different.
Great. Any questions for the panel or any comments anybody would like to make? Yeah, Matthew.
Thank you. I have a question referring to Dr. Wiesenberg's explanation of the sort of lower half, upper half approach to determining who gets tenure, et cetera. I'm wondering, is that a comparison being made among just the untenured faculty, or are we looking at the entire department? Because my concern in that situation would be that someone who's only had a career of 4 or 5 years is going to be compared or put on the same scale as someone who's been at it for 20, 25, 30, 35 years. So how exactly does that work? Thank you.
Yeah, I should answer that since I brought it up. Well, obviously, you have to look at different points of people in their career. You can't just say, you know, this senior faculty member, you know, say in chemistry has brought in $10 million in research funding over their career, and this new faculty member has only brought in $100,000 in research funding. You've got to look at where they are within their peers and their potential for high level of productivity. So, yeah, I want to mention one thing about the mentoring best practices are on the website. I didn't produce these. They were produced by a faculty committee that Phyllis Justice chaired when she was chair of the history department, and they did a phenomenal job. They held faculty focus groups. They looked at other universities, and those of you who are the faculty that have mentors, I think the mentors are required to buy the drinks. So you want to look at those guidelines to make sure you're getting all your due.
Let's look at some practical things about preparing for tenure. How do you get organized, Mark? How do you get organized? You know, these binders, volume 1, volume 2, 1 inch, 3 inches.
I taught previously at Eastern Michigan University, and I stole this completely from one of my colleagues. Above his desk, there were 3 buckets, and one said service, one said research, one said teaching. And every time something crossed his desk, every time he got an email, every time he had a thought, something went in those 3 buckets. And so I stole that idea and have the same thing. One of my colleagues, Catherine Rand, and I discussed this. Hers is right next to her desk on her piano. So it's kind of in your face all the time. Sometimes we forget when something comes across our desk. That student that you had 2 years ago writes you a lengthy thank you email, and you sit there and you're really thankful for it, but you go on to the other 60 emails you have. We just forget about that one. Print that one off. Put that one in your teaching file at that very moment. With that having been said, I know some of us, I'm not a hard copy guy still. When I'm looking at student papers, I want to hold it. Some people will put everything on their computer, but as we are currently doing at USM, everything is handed in as hard copy. So I go ahead and turn all my stuff into hard copy immediately while I'm thinking about it, so that when I get closer to the process, I'm not having to convert all the things that are on my computer into hard copy things that look good, because we know a lot of those things, once they're printed, they don't look good, or we need to convert them in some way. So I would advise, have it somewhere you can see it all the time so it constantly reminds you. I would go ahead and put things in hard copy as soon as possible, and make sure you're looking at the promotion and tenure documents, dossier, things that are on the Provost website, so you know in what way that piece of paper is going to have to fit into that.
And tracking things these days is a lot easier than it was before the internet, right, Sabina?
What?
Do you want to comment on your organization?
I would like to request a different moderator.
You started it.
No, what I do to stay organized, although I'm fully promoted, so I don't need it anymore, but I am evaluated by my colleagues with respect to my research, teaching, and service output every year. So I keep an extended curriculum vitae sort of updated, which means when I advise a new student, mentor a new undergraduate student in his or her research activities, I put the student and the topic on my CV. And if I keep up with that, I don't have a whole lot to do. And then I have an electronic bucket where I put my activities in. I'm sort of ambivalent about student thank you emails, because sometimes you don't know what has been solicited and what is unsolicited thank you emails. So
Thank you.
We tend to not look at those.
Thank you. Dr. Hill, Lillian Hill. Lillian chairs a lot of dissertation committees, and she has to keep track of those. You want to talk a little bit about your secret?
I don't know if there is a secret. I mean, with dissertation students, you get to know them personally. It's a long relationship, and I guess that's what helps me keep track of all the different topics that I'm mentoring at any given time. But I'm also a strong believer in the committee process for dissertations, and so this is one opportunity to really engage with your colleagues in a way you don't otherwise. And I've learned a lot from my colleagues, and I think together we help the students create a stronger document.
Thank you. We got a question from Danilo over here.
Well, it's not necessarily a question, but a couple of things. One about the mentor, and on my situation, I had a very good mentor, but it was not very participative. And I think the best advice I have to say here is go and ask questions, because the mentor, they're busy on their own process, on their own goals, and their own research, and you go and ask any question you have, and the worst can happen, they're going to say, I don't know. And the second thing about the practicality of the paperwork itself that you have to turn it in is look to successful people around you and ask to see their the way they present their documents. And for us, like I had the privilege of having people who showed how to do it, and have the privilege to lend my material to a couple of different people, and seeing them going well, it's a sign that whatever you're doing is also not correct, but is well perceived by others.
And of course, if you're in a department that doesn't have many senior colleagues, you can seek examples and advice elsewhere too, right? Because there are some departments that don't have as many folks beyond that. Melissa, how about you? You want to add anything to what we've heard about organization?
I would just say a little bit about the actual dossier submission itself. And this is probably saying a little bit about my personality, but I tried to be sure that everything that was presented in Volume 2 directly followed the order as it was presented on my CV, and was color-coded based on categories on my CV with tabs. So if the reviewer was looking for the second or third publication on the list, all of my publications had the same color-coded tabs, and they were numbered according to the publication. I think that was a little bit more, well, within the unit anyway, perceived as helpful in being able to evaluate the material, because it's a lot of material.
Sabine, what do you see as the linkage between the annual review and the pre-tenure review, also known as the third-year review?
Well, the pre-tenure review is sort of an evaluation midpoint between the time a new faculty member was hired and then going up, and the time he or she goes up for tenure. And so it's sort of an assessment of whether the person is on track for being successful as far as tenure and promotion is concerned, or whether there might be some course corrections necessary, or whether there are some points that need to be paid attention to. And it definitely should not be punitive, but sort of constructive criticism, if you wish.
Dennis, do you want to talk about that, the linkages between the two? I know that's come up with the Council of Chairs. It's come up with discussions with new chairs.
Well, there are really two parts to this. One is how the annual evaluations are linked to promotion and tenure, and how the third-year review. The third-year review really should be a mid-course correction. It's the assessment, a thorough assessment by your colleagues on the body of work you've produced in the first couple of years to tell you whether you're on the right track to receiving tenure or not. And so that's the real purpose of the third-year review, is to give you substantive feedback at that point so you know how you're doing and what you might need to do differently as you produce the rest of the body of work that you're going to present for tenure and promotion. The annual reviews, it is our fondest hope that the annual reviews give you that guidance also, and that your annual reviews each year, if they're deemed to be excellent or very good, means you're going to be awarded tenure when you produce the full body of your work. That's not always the case because, as I say, there are multiple parts to this. One is how you're doing in teaching, research, and service, and the other is the expectation of your continued work at a very high level throughout your career. And as I say, in the best case scenario is that your annual evaluations give you all the guidance you need toward tenure, and they should. The best purpose of the annual evaluations is not just to give you a rating from needs improvement to excellent, but to also give you guidance on what you need to do differently in the years going forward. So we hope there's a tight linkage between these two. Our attorneys hope there's a really tight linkage between these two, and in almost every case there is, but not in every case.
Any questions? Yeah, Nick, or comments here.
I was wondering what the panel thinks about the latest emphasis on collaboration, either within your own department or across campus, and how that might affect your activity. Sometimes the emphasis on doing well in your annual review makes you focus on yourself, and I wonder how you strike that balance between collaboration and, independent agency.
You want to try that one, Melissa? You don't have to.
I found collaboration to be essential to my success in my research agenda. In the School of Human Performance and Recreation, we're on a 3-3 teaching load, so collaborative efforts were critical, or I don't think I would have experienced the success in the research area, if that's what you're referring to. And
it certainly varies by discipline, right? I know some of the folks in the humanities, you do it basically on your own, right? It's your book, it's your interpretation, whereas if you're in psychology, there might be multiple authors on a publication, so it does vary, and it goes to the provost's comments earlier that it's those in your department who should know most about kind of the standards of making it. Let's see if anybody on the coast has a question. Anybody on the coast? Yeah, go ahead. Is it on mute? There we go. Yeah, we got you.
Okay. I have a question about the departmental guidelines. Are those evaluated or used as part of the evaluation the whole way through the process, to the college, the university, all the facilities?
Good, very good question. Sabina.
Yes, there are, I think for each college, there are two sets of guidelines. There are the unit level guidelines, that's the, let's say in my case, the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, T&P guidelines. Then there are college-wide guidelines, and then there are the university-wide guidelines. and the university-wide guidelines supersede everything. And so the college and unit level guidelines must follow the university guidelines, but there may be something specific to a unit or a particular college that is unique. And so that's why you need to pay attention to the unit guidelines, definitely.
We've had instances when the CAC, the College Advisory Committee, requests guidelines from a particular department because they want to see how those guidelines line up with the decision that they have to make. So we do see it in, we like the congruence that Sabina just described, but we also will rely on them to make decisions when it gets further away from us or further away from the decision bodies. Questions? Oh, there was a point over here. Good question over here. When are we going to go to an electronic portfolio, an electronic dossier? In the future. And it's something to look forward to. Jim, any questions? You wanted to... Oh, yes, here.
Yeah, this is Hao Xiu from the Biological Sciences. I have a question regarding the evaluation of the research productivity. In my field, if you publish in the Journal of Biological Sciences, it's considered a very good journal. But if you publish in Cell, it's an extremely good journal. So, people in my field would know that, okay, if you publish one Cell paper, it kind of similar to publishing 3 JBC papers. So I don't know what is the mechanism here at USM to evaluate that, to put that into perspective. Let's say my colleague here, if he published 9 JBC papers, which is extremely good, while I published 3 Cell papers, would he be viewed more favorably compared to me, or I just need to know how the university, how the college evaluate that? Thank you.
Very good question. We'll give that one to Sabine.
Okay. You are right to ask that question because there is clearly a balance. If I think you publish one Cell paper over 6 years, you might not be served well. You may want to publish one Cell paper and a few JBC papers, potentially. So it's up to your colleagues in your unit how they value that. But I think, the Cell paper clearly is way up there. I think, Dennis, don't you also ask for the impact factors in your evaluation? So
we ask for the publication, we ask for the acceptance rate. So yeah, we ask for the acceptance rate of the journal, so presumably if Cell is a higher rated journal, then the acceptance rate is lower than in the other journals. And so I think the key is to have the right balance. And I know in the College of Business, they actually rate journals as A, B, and C, I think. And you have to have a certain number in A-level journals and a certain number total papers, and not just one paper in an A-level journal or 2, but you're required to have a certain number as well as so many in the higher rated journals. So I think that's a good way to view it. You want to continue to get your work published as much as you can, and you want to, the way I would describe it is if you got a really good research outcome and you want to submit it for publication, you can submit it in a journal that will accept it but has a lower rating or less impact factor. Or you can, like they say in baseball, you can swing for the fences. You could try to get it in Cell, and then if you do, then that's even better for you and your career, and it's better for the university because it's a more widely recognized journal. So certainly we encourage that, but I think you need to, as Sabina said, you need to have a sufficient number of papers as well as the highest quality papers to convince your colleagues that you have a sustained level of productivity.
Can I add something to that as far as top level journals are concerned? when you're a full professor, you have the luxury to try to go to the very top. You think you have made a fantastic discovery, so you send it to Science and Nature. They don't think it's that fantastic, so they politely decline. Then you have the time to go to the next tier and potentially the next tier until you finally find the tier that matches the significance of your discovery. And so as a pre-tenure professor, you don't have that luxury, because that whole rewriting and resubmission and reevaluation can take a year. And you definitely don't want to go that route. So you want to sort of think about what is in your best interest and maybe shoot for the top level journals at a later stage when you have successfully passed that first hurdle.
And there are some indices that tell you what the turnaround time is for a journal. I know Cabell's does that in education, and there's some of that, I think, Melanie, in the social sciences as well, right? In psychology. Yeah, I mean, that's the way the peer review process is supposed to work, though. If you shoot for the top, right, and then you should get really good feedback, even if you get rejected, and then you can take that feedback into account, maybe rerun your experiment or rethink your thesis and resubmit, maybe in the same tier, but a different journal, maybe below that. Okay, good. Let's, yes, Stacy. Stacy wants to talk about the creative end of this.
He's trying to read my mind. As faculty members, we have multiple expectations. We're expected to develop as teachers, as researchers. We spend a lot of time talking about that, and as citizens and participants in shared governance. And I wonder if the panel or some of my other colleagues here can speak about the teaching component and about how we measure, demonstrate, document, consider the development and increasing quality of teaching. Melissa?
Sure. This one's a little bit easier for me. I have a background in pedagogy, so teaching is of very high importance to me. I want to make sure that what I'm doing in the classroom is effective and that the students have a good experience. So I think there are a number of ways that you can engage in improving your instruction. Student evaluations don't always tell the whole story, so over time I have implemented a couple of other ways to evaluate student performance in the class. I do a mid-semester evaluation from the students where the feedback is anonymous, and especially in my online classes that has been helpful because every group of students is slightly different, so that gives me an opportunity to make a mid-semester adjustment to what I'm doing. And at peer evaluations, we don't have a structured peer evaluation system in human performance, but on request, I have asked colleagues to come in and observe my teaching and provide feedback. And there are a multitude of assessments online that you could just print out an evaluation for higher education instruction that they can fill out and provide feedback in class. And they know the subject matter, so sometimes they are more or better able to provide feedback than maybe an outside individual. And then, of course, I will provide some props to the Learning Enhancement Center there in the back, that there are so many services that they offer that we just have to ask. I don't know how many times I met with individuals in the LEC in my first 3 years asking questions about how to better engage students and what kind of projects or activities can I do in class to provide better opportunities for them to connect the materials to their outside experiences. And I've always, regardless of whether it was online teaching or face-to-face instruction, found their feedback and their resources very, very helpful.
If I could add to that, teaching is what I'm interested in. It's what I research. Pedagogy, very interesting to me, and as well as how we're evaluated as teachers. What does good teaching look like? We also have teacher forums on campus. If you go to the provost page on our website, you can see past ones. You can connect to what the schedule is for the rest of the semester, and then that will come out again for next year. I like going to these. I see perspectives from other people outside of my field. Some of us might find ourselves teaching in a format of 300 students. I often wonder about that 26-year-old PhD person who's teaching for the first time in their life. They're doing it at our institution, and there's 300 people in front of them all holding clickers going, what do I do now? And there's someone on campus to help you with that. I like the idea of going to our dean, the dean or someone in your department within your unit and saying, I need to see someone or talk to someone about teaching online. I need to talk to someone about teaching large groups. I need to talk to someone about teaching this or that. There are lots of experts on campus, lots of places to go. Something I need to do more of, inviting my own colleagues to come in and watch me teach and get feedback. I also like the idea that there are lots of places you can go and look at what other universities do as far as the actual measurement of teaching. I will say that we're in the middle of looking at that right now in the School of Music, and there's not nationwide consensus on how that is measured, but there are lots of suggestions and ideas out there.
Yeah, this is, and I'll pass the mic to you as soon as I finish my comments here, but yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the teaching forums, because that's something we started 2 years ago, which gives every faculty member an opportunity to interact with others and share ideas and hear best practices that other people are using in their teaching to improve your own. And also the Learning Enhancement Center, if you've not been there, you should make a trip there and talk to them about the services that they provide and the support they can provide for improving teaching. The primary method we have of teaching evaluation is the student evaluation of teaching, and that's an imperfect tool. And what you talked about peer evaluation of teaching, which is what most other people use, but one of the things I think is really valuable, especially for new faculty, untenured in your first teaching job, is to produce a teaching portfolio. How many of you have a teaching portfolio? Anyone in the room? One? More than one? Two? So, anyone on the coast have a teaching portfolio? Raise your hand. Okay, we got one down there. So 50% of the attendees down there and a smaller percentage here. See how statistics can be used in the evaluation process. But, I encourage you to look into producing a teaching portfolio to provide additional evidence of your teaching capabilities. And every one of your department chairs has a link to a website at Vanderbilt University where they have a lot of great information on what goes in a teaching portfolio and how it's used. I know because I spoke to the chairs recently about this and sent them that web link. And any of the faculty here that aren't chairs get that link sent to them by their chairs? Got a few chairs in the room here. Having a teaching portfolio helps you focus your thinking on how you're doing your pedagogy. And it also will show your colleagues that you really care about the quality of your teaching, and you're putting, other than just going to class and doing the teaching, you're providing additional information on how it, and what you're doing and how you're doing it well.
I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to pass it to Joyce. You can get that that portfolio started if you just go to your annual reviews, and under that section called Teaching, put that into an annual file that you could call self-reflection, right? So you could actually chronicle your thoughts about where you're going with your teaching, how you're taking steps to improve it, etc. If you go to that front part of your annual review that says teaching, don't keep going into research and service, and then clip that, and then you're on your way. Joyce.
I will say quickly for the teaching portfolios, I encourage you all to do it. I require my graduate students to do it at this point. If they are going on the market, it's now expected that they have something like that. And there are so many programs out there that can make it easy to make an online teaching portfolio that's shareable, and you can either make it public or not, but it's good stuff. Just don't go look at mine, it could be better. This said, my question is about this idea of teaching evaluations and how we present ourselves as teacher in these materials. So I think my question is for people who have reviewed binders. A number of my colleagues do sort of separate teaching evaluations in which they ask their students to write qualitative remarks, and they include those. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, and I haven't done it because of that. I do lots of things sort of informally in class, reflection,
to ensure that, you know, I'm doing what I need to for my students, but I've never done anything that I've then chosen to include in my binder. And should I? I mean, are they doing the right, should they do that, or is that not something we should do?
Yeah, Sabine.
Okay, so in my department, we require the verbatim comments from the students. So every year for the annual evaluations, and they also go into the dossiers. And so it's just a normal procedure. And if there are repeated comments year after year that don't change over time, where you don't see an upward trend, then that will be taken into consideration. Usually, you know, faculty who receive good or bad comments react towards those very quickly and make changes. Oh, in addition, again, we don't.
Separate
I
in-class evaluation.
I suggest no, not separate in class, because students, I don't know how those, as an evaluator of such a dossier, I would not know what to think about those, because I don't know whether you threatened the student to only write good things about you. Well, no, that's, I know you didn't, but you know, you don't know whether it was truly anonymous or how you assembled those, so we don't consider those.
I think another way you can document teaching effectiveness is through publishing about your teaching. Now, that doesn't fit into the career paths of some faculty roles, but certainly in mine, it has been very helpful. I teach in adult education and higher education. One of my research interests is teaching and learning. And so contributing to the research about teaching, I think, is another way. And getting grants that contribute to your teaching is, again, part of a whole package of documenting your interest and your contributions.
Yeah, just to follow up on Sabine's point too, that chairs and department personnel committees look for patterns. You know, they don't look for one outlier and make a case based on an outlier, but they look for patterns over time, right? And those are the kinds of things that come up in annual review that can be addressed from year to year to year. And of course, that's what chairs tend to report on. Am I right, Chuck, about that? The patterns? Yeah, okay. let me give it to Chuck. I'm forcing an answer out of him.
No, I think it's exactly right that you're looking for progress over time. You're looking for change. You're looking for all possible evidence that would suggest that someone is serious about teaching and is effective.
Good, thank you. More about teaching. Teaching is obviously it's very important. I mean, you can connect it to retention, right? And I view teaching evaluations as the provost does as an imperfect measure of teaching. I view them as a measure of student satisfaction. So you could possibly be an ineffective teacher and have high satisfaction, right? Or you could be an effective teacher and have low satisfaction, right? So that's, again, even more rationale for a second measure, be it a portfolio or a peer review or these kinds of things. The more points of evaluation, the more secure your, or the more valid your teaching assessment will be. Any comments? Anything more about teaching? Yeah, Nick.
I would also say that the pursuit of improving your teaching, as documented in your annual evaluations or pre-tenure review, what have you, I think would also be seen favorably, and I'll go so far as to say that that could be measured in some way in such documents.
Tom?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Add a couple of things. Certainly in the School of Music, if our trumpet professor wants to continue to inspire trumpet students toward performance, he's going to continually put videos in front of them, recordings in front of them of other artists on the trumpet, and that becomes inspiring, and especially when they can see someone, especially if they're their own age. And I like to think of teaching in that way, if I'm a teacher and I value teaching, I can get inspired by watching other teachers. And we've talked about the forums already. I would assume I have colleagues in my department that would welcome me into their classroom simply to watch them teach. I had a great conversation the other day with one of my colleagues, Marianne Cowell, who's a vocal coach. And what we do is very, very different from one another as far as what gets us promotion and tenure. But I felt kind of guilty in that she was saying lots of things that I know from the research side of things. And I said, Marianne, how do you know this? Have you studied this? She said, no, it's just what I do. But I do this because I've seen a lot of other people teach what I teach and teach what I don't teach. I found a video the other day on YouTube of whole brain learning. Those of you that may know anything about this, this is a third grade classroom. I showed it to our PhD and master's level teaching students, and their jaws were on the ground within 3 minutes. And we talked for an hour. I only expected to talk for 10 minutes. We talked for an hour about what an amazing teacher this person was and the concepts and how we identify them and how they could bring those concepts into their own teaching. So I'm just a big advocate of us being consumers of teaching by watching other teachers, whether it's live on video or whatever, because if nothing else, it inspires us to know, how do they do that?
How many people have invited a colleague into the classroom to watch them teach? Well, good. That looks like about a quarter of the group. And that's something that's, something you can do, even somebody from a different department. I mean, if you want to get somebody in who's, a department down the way, that's a nice way to get some feedback without feeling too nervous about it. Anything more on teaching? We want to get, Lillian, is that a hand or is that no? Okay. How about service? Where does service, with teaching, scholarship, service, collegiality, we're going to get to that. How does service fit into this? It's a three-legged stool, I'm told. Joyce? Service? No? Melanie, do you want to talk about service?
I'm not tenured, so just give that. But service, at least in the psychology department, is an important aspect. Luckily, our mentors, senior faculty, did a good job with me and other junior faculty in helping us figure out what's good service to do, right? That's going to connect to research or collaborations, might help you in other aspects of your work. Or what you can do that's a low effort, so that you at least get some service, get some chance to be out there, but not eat away at your time to do research and teaching. But I think in general, service is a very important aspect, but be mindful, be selective in what type of service activities that you proactively choose, and also seek mentorship around the choices that you accept when you've got leeway to make some decisions about choosing certain service obligations.
And there's service, right, there's service at the program level, there's service at the department level, there's service at the college level, the university level, there's service to the profession, right? So there's lots of different sides to service, and that's where a mentor can really be helpful, right? To kind of help you balance the many demands that are placed on one for service. The longer you're at an institution, the bigger the service load grows. Here we go.
Well, I'm just in my second year, Steve, with the library. I had an opportunity my first year in the service area with the anniversary of Freedom Summer. So I was put on a large committee, and I had some things I could contribute to that. But those were, as an example of an episodic service opportunity, as opposed to maybe a committee that meets all the time, annually, I guess. So they're episodic opportunities, and it was an opportunity to grow, but also serve.
And meet people on the other side of campus too, right? And in the community. Great. Stacy.
I think the number one question I get from junior faculty is kind of, can you demystify service for me? I think there's an assumption that it's just serving on committees. And I think that's one form that it takes. But I think really, and I'll say what I said earlier, it's understanding that we have signed up to kind of exist in the world in academia where we believe in shared governance, and that there are a lot of things that we need to do above and beyond the scope of teaching and researching in order to further the aims and the mission of the institution, and we do those through service.
I'd actually would like to ask a question of the provost. Sometimes, especially in the arts, whether or not something goes into the service bucket or the teaching bucket or the creative activity bucket is difficult to say. I'm wondering if you have a one or maybe two sentence definition of service.
Well, the first part of your question, your comment is, I think it depends on the department you're in and the field that you're in as to what's considered service. So I think that that's where your colleagues and what they consider service is where you need to look first, because in some programs, mentoring graduate students is considered teaching, and in other programs, mentoring graduate students is considered service. So it depends on the program you're in and how your colleagues assess that. But I think as others have stated, in academia, you're expected to provide service as part of your job activities. Being a faculty member, in my view, is one of the toughest jobs in the world because you're pulled in a lot of directions. You have to be an excellent teacher, you have to create scholarship and creative activities, and you have to give service to both your department, the college, the university, and the community, and your professional community. And what I would say is that, as you talked about finding minimal service, was the comment from psychology that, you don't want to get engaged to be the chair of the Strategic Planning Council as an assistant professor. But what you might look for in your early years is service to your field. In other words, if you review papers for a journal in biology, that's going to let you know what your colleagues at other places are doing, and the editor will call on you. Or if you serve on a committee for the American Psychological Association or whatever your organization is, that's going to help you engage with other colleagues who are pursuing the same sorts of things that you are. So some of your service early on, I would suggest, if you can serve the academic field that you're in, then that's a benefit to both you in getting service credit and also you as a professional and seeing how other things are done at other institutions. And I should say the Department of Dance that Stacy chairs probably has one of the best service records of any department in the university. Just about anywhere you go, faculty senate, the assessment committee, you name it, there's someone from dance doing that. And they really take it seriously in that department and provide great service to the university.
One of their mentors is James Brown, the hardest working man in rock and roll. Watch me. Let's go to collegiality. This is kind of the hidden one that's hard to explain, hard to describe, hard to evaluate, hard to put a finger on. I have a colleague named Joe Omi, a department chair, and he refers to collegiality as playing well in the sandbox. How well do you play in the sandbox? And that's, yeah, I think that's Joe. Sabine, how does this?
Looking away, that means I don't want to take.
Okay, sorry. My eyes ain't what they used to be.
No, but collegiality is difficult to define because there's a very fine line between somebody who is considered not collegial and somebody who just has different opinions than maybe the majority of the faculty in the department. So I just throw that out as another point.
Melissa?
That's a really good point. That being able to differentiate your personal feelings about someone versus whether or not you agree philosophically about an approach or something that's happening in your department. I think too, we just got off the service topic, and when I think about collegiality, one of the things that comes to mind is contribution within the unit or the group on some level. Are you contributing? Are you at faculty meetings? Are you engaged in curricular development? Are you having those conversations with your colleagues? If you're always the absent person, I think that probably plays a role too in whether or not people perceive your commitment and investment to the unit and to the university.
Mark, how does it work over in music?
Probably a lot. I heard a lot of us have probably heard, keep your head down till you get tenure and then you can say something. Stacy, I hope you don't mind. Stacy Broshman Fletcher, I mentioned something similar to that one day and she said, what? Why would you do that? And I appreciate her view of that. How can I establish relationships if I don't express my opinions? If I'm certainly on a committee or with other groups of people where I may have some area of expertise that they don't, it's my duty to share that, but do that in a way that we're all in it together. There's some current buzzwords in ed. What is your level of physical empathy, intellectual empathy, and physical empathy for the people that you're with, and how much are we willing to consider all of our pieces and what those really look like when we're trying to get along with each other. I think it's interesting, on one of the documents was given to us to prepare for this, someone said that collegiality is a lack of repeated incivility. So I want to know what percentage of incivility we can demonstrate and it still be okay. It is playing the sandbox well. And I think it's okay. Nick has helped in this way. I've gone to Nick and said, what does this mean? Or tell me the best way to interact with this person, not from a complaint, but simply trying to get to know. And that's the empathy of really trying to know that person.
Does Nick always take the big toy?
He's on the tenure committee, so I will not comment.
We'll talk later. Dr. Hill, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Well, in higher ed, I teach a course called the Professoriate, and I tell graduate students who think they might want to be faculty that collegiality is more than playing well in the sandbox. It's also avoiding running with scissors, if I can borrow the title of a book. And, you know, we have seen over time junior people come and go who are argumentative. They come in from a point of view of criticism. I worked with a man in a medical college who was with us for 1 year, and he spent his entire year saying, well, why don't you do it that way? And we'd say, Brian, we do it that way. But he was so busy with an attitude of critique that he didn't take the trouble to figure out how things actually worked. And so I do think Mark has a good point that your first year, at least, you should be watching and listening and learning, you know, before you start offering opinions that are controversial. I don't mean that you should, you know, suppress your personality or your potential for contributions, but pay attention, learn how things are really working first.
Any questions, comments about that? Another perspective from the library, then.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think I liked a lot of what Melissa said about collegiality being, you know, contributing to things. And so I think that it is important that you show up to meetings, you volunteer for voluntary events once in a while, and you sort of are seen to be, you know, doing your part to contribute to the good of the institution, whether it's, you know, or the library, the department, the university, or what have you. And I don't know that I have anything really unique to offer about collegiality.
No, thank you. Thank you. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Anybody else? Anybody without tenure want to ask a question about collegiality? Whether I'm pronouncing it correctly. Yes.
One of the questions that has come up over and over again is understanding how they balance research, service, and teaching. So that, I know that usually comes up. So, but go ahead, you were going to a question.
put this in your dossier, or what exactly do you do in your dossier to highlight this? Would it just be sort of understood in all the other, and especially the service section? Do you have a pretty picture?
If you can document the number of pies that you baked for your colleagues, a minimum of 6 per. I was going to say something to kind of flip it a little bit, just to comment. Let's not assume that every department is a very collegial department, and that it's up to the incoming assistant professor to create waves and cause a problem. At the risk of putting in certain mutinous thoughts within our junior faculty, I'll go ahead and say that you may be one of the best in the field, but not the best fit in terms of the culture of a given department here on campus.
Yeah, I think in the faculty handbook, they talk about positive interactions with others. And so if you're looking to where it's codified, that's about where it is. And it'll, I think it sometimes shows up in an annual review, this person missed half the faculty meetings or something like that. And that's usually a signal that maybe you should go to 75% of those.
I don't know. I think probably a lot of people in this room have heard that saying that you need to be competent, reliable, and nice. But you actually only need 2 of those to succeed, of those 3 things. But if you falter in 2 of those, you have a problem. But I think in regards to collegiality, I think it's positively resolve problems that will always surface with a lot of people in the same room. You don't have to be nice to people, but you have to positively resolve the issues. So I'm trying to say is like, you don't have to get smiles from everybody or try to say what the people in the room want to hear, as long as you're working towards a positive solution. And that will come across a long way.
Other points? Yes.
As far as putting in our dossier, we put just a paragraph. So we self-evaluate our collegiality with those positive interactions and things that we do, and just not just volunteering and contributing and being on the committees and going to faculty meetings, but also sharing ideas, being, collaborating with each other as well.
We are going to let the provost have the final word because he's the one who sends it on to the president.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Thanks to the panel for sharing your thoughts with us. I think it's been a very useful conversation. And a couple things I was thinking of as we were talking here at the end, Lillian Hill was saying, seek first to understand and then to be understood. I mean, that's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. And if you haven't looked up the 7 habits, I encourage you to do that. And then the thought about collegiality, I was thinking of Life's Little Instruction book by Jackson Brown. And one of the things in there, it says if you're with a group of people, and you can say a group of faculty, and you're getting ready to move a piano, which does happen around here, it says don't grab the stool. Be one of the people to, and to me that shows your effort to help create a solution, which is what you were talking about there. So I think I think if you haven't read Life's Little Instruction book, you might do it as well. Because I think, there are a lot of things that are just general knowledge of how to get along. And I saw several different faculty laugh when someone said not every department is collegial among themselves, and you might get into one of those situations as well. There's a lot of good literature out there that can help you if you need more guidance than we've been able to provide or your colleagues can be able to provide. One of the books that I really highly recommend to new faculty is a book by Donald Kennedy called Academic Duty. And do any of you have this book, Academic Duty? I used to give it to new faculty members. And I have maybe 8 or 10 copies in my office. And so the first eight or 10 people that email Linda Dorsey in my office, we'll send those copies out to you. And there's actually, that book is, in my view, a user's manual of how to be a faculty member. There's a thing on teaching. There's one on to discover, which is research, and there's even a section on how to get along with the colleagues in your department. So if you haven't seen that book, we can send the few copies that we have out, and I encourage you to look at that. We have more than 8 or 10? Okay. Well, that's great. Well, anyway, that's, not many of you have time to read until the summer, but at least other than work, but that's something you might do. Our goal when you're hired as a new faculty member is to have everyone succeed in being awarded tenure and being promoted. And I hope that the conversations we've had today have helped with that. Certainly talk to your faculty mentors. Your department chair is always there. The Learning Enhancement Center if you need help. The teaching forums. We try to provide as many different resources to you as we can, and then let you choose the ones that are most useful to you. I don't have any other words of wisdom. I think we've heard great comments from the participants and the panel and the group on the coast. I'm glad one of you has a teaching portfolio down there. And I'd just like to thank you all for being here, and let's thank the panel and Dr. O'Brien.